You're tuned in to Around the Lens, the internet's only live streaming roundtable discussion podcast, featuring Zach Roberts, Ron Hamilton, Travis Keys, and your host, David J. Murphy.
Are you running for HUD?
Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 176. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Joining me as always are my co-hosts, Zach Roberts. Hello, Zach. Is he in
Which way was this supposed to go again? Which way, Dave? Which way? Was it this way?
Yeah,
or is it this way?
Perfect. That's it right there. Mm-hmm. Yep, right there. That's it.
Your other left.
Oh, this one then. Okay. Yeah.
And Travis Keys.
What is going on, guys? Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day to you as well. Yes,
very,
our Memorial Day
very
special.
Important episode here.
Let's drink to our veterans and our service members who did not come back from the war.
Absolutely.
Or any conflict, or any of those who have passed along. Anyways,
and the ones that have come back.
What's that?
Let's remember all of them.
Of course. Well, we got Veterans Day for, everybody else.
Yeah.
Memorial Day for those who passed. We have Armed Forces Day, which I think was the week prior for those who are currently serving. So a lot of days. I went out and got a few discounts today that I took advantage of course. Why not?
What else did you do with the weekend, the long weekend?
I did quite a bit with the long weekend, actually. Now you mentioned it, I went and shot the U.S. Naval Academy graduation in Annapolis, Maryland, which if you're interested in seeing that product, I threw it on aroundthelens.com, so you can see the photographs and the video that I shot from that event. And then beyond that, I went to the U.S. Naval, the PBS Memorial Day concert, the National Memorial Day concert on the Capitol lawn. That was a neat experience. I'd never been to that, and I've lived in near the D.C. area for a lot of my life, and I just never got around to going to it. So, I took the opportunity, and it was a neat experience,
Oh, nice.
The actors there do a great job retelling the stories of these real life stories of service members who have these very harrowing, dramatic stories, and they do a great job telling them. And they get into it. Great. They're crying and stuff like that. So they're taking it real seriously. So that was the biggest part of the concert. There were some music bands that played, but and there was some music, but the storytelling was the key aspect of the event.
The highlight of the day.
Yeah. But it almost felt like a lot like a Veterans Day celebration as well, because there was a lot of hey, let's salute our troops, let's recognize our World War II, Korean, Vietnam, yada yada, veterans, stuff like that. So it seemed like they were trying to kind of, kill two birds with one stone, not only just, honoring the folks who've died, but the folks who are currently living. So, which is fine. I don't think they have a Veterans Day event. So, this is kind of like their annual event to recognize all service members. So,
right.
But it was a good event. I enjoyed it.
Nice.
Yeah. So again, those photos I'll probably throw up on the website at some point. But you can go check out the U.S. Naval Academy stuff. I create some photos, and I also create a video from the event.
Nice.
So it was a neat event. If you ever get the opportunity to go to one of those Academy graduations, I highly recommend it. It's it's not only cool for the photo opportunities, but just a neat event to be around. A lot of good speakers and stuff like that. In fact, the president is speaking at the Air Force Academy graduation this weekend. So if you guys want to go out to that, there you go.
That's not the weekend I would go.
What's that?
It's probably not the weekend I would go.
No, you're busy next weekend or this coming
might
weekend?
Be, yeah. Doing anything but.
Oh, okay. What you up to?
No, I got a lot of shoots planned this week. This week's kind of a busy thing. How about you, Zach? Anything fun over the long weekend?
Not really.
Besides rolling around in the bushes?
Yeah. Just trying to hide my shame from everyone on the planet due to the fact that I got bad poison ivy and oak on both of my arms, which is why I'm wearing long sleeve shirts in 80-degree weather. So Yeah, that's about all I've been dealing with.
That's a slow, long torture right there.
Yeah. And it's I used to be. I was one of those people that would brag about, and this is like literally comeuppance for me. Like 5 years ago, I could be like, "What are you talking about? This is not a problem." And like, oh god, like I'm already like a messaging.
Your friends didn't have the heart to tell you were spreading basil on your face.
No, I mean, I know
Poison ivy.
like, I used to be the one because my stepmother used to be like, she's one of those people that, like, if she's in the same room as someone who once walked by poison ivy, she would get it. And like
everything nature seems to be getting stronger, from poison ivy, poison sumac, poison this, the ticks. I mean, you name it, they're getting stronger and better. And I'm
horrible here. I mean, it's like changing nature photography. Like, you used to be able to, like, out in our backwoods.
Nature photography for me now is a car with a really long lens.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean,
I'm not going out there.
I got this, and I messaged two of my friends up in Alaska, and I was just like, because Alaska doesn't have snakes. For the most part. I mean, obviously, Alaska's this massive state that ranges from basically Seattle to, but it doesn't have snakes, it doesn't have poison ivy, or I don't think it has oak or whatever, at least traditionally. And so I was just like, have you guys gotten this yet? Because you guys have started getting snakes now, and then started getting ticks in like the southern region. Well, and because of climate change,
there are no camels in Alaska either.
Still, yeah, possibly. I don't know. I haven't gone to the zoo ever, so but.
Well, speaking of nature photography, that segues very well into our first topic this evening. A topic that you actually brought up, Zach. So basically, you know, National Geographic used to be the bastion of, you know, great photography and, you know, just great storytelling and visual journalism and ethics and all that, but we seem to be losing that step by step here, at least with user submitted material, getting through their stringent sort of review process, because there's just more and more manipulated photographs getting into the stream of stuff. And well, I'm just going to throw it over to you, Zach. You can talk about the story in more detail, and then we can talk.
I would disagree that National Geographic has been ever really historically great about retouching and
I mean, whether or not they've been good about it, they've had the reputation, you know.
It's never been a deserved one though. I mean, like they famously have cropped photos and cut and made up scenes basically since back in the time when the 50s and 40s and 30s and things like that. So I mean, it's not something. I mean, that's pretty standard for photojournalism of, or photography, nature, whatever, anthropological photography.
Or like that one story where the guy
not to mention Steve McCurry, but
the one story where the guy had to fake the photographs, he actually got I don't know, I think it was animal tusks from a museum that had barcodes on them or something like that.
Yes. Yep.
So what you're saying then, and this isn't a story because this is par for the course for what National Geographic does, right? I mean, all right, moving on.
This one's a little different. Even I thought this one was a little different.
This is a little dramatic, and I don't know if it's a little more dramatic or whatever. But one of the things that National Geographic is starting to do a lot more of is soliciting photographs from just non-professionals, and they have all these different contests which read the rights grabs. They're not good. So if you're ever going to submit to National Geographic, basically the last time I heard, you're just basically giving your photo away for them to put on tote bags or to whatever. So be careful. I think it's called the one shot or something like that. They do. But beside that, there has been a bunch of photographs that have been outed, specifically a lot of nature and landscape photos that have been outed as inordinately edited. Basically, any of those photos that you see that are like, oh my God, how did they get that? It looks too good to be true. A lot of times it is, because there's technical capabilities that cameras have, and then there's what shows up in an article like this, or in a National Geographic photo like this, of the baobab trees silhouetted against the Milky Way, which anyone who's photographed the Milky Way, I've been in the back nowheres of Alaska with no thing or ever photographing the Milky Way, and I get it. Alaska versus Africa, very different, sky pad, things, but it doesn't really look like that. It doesn't look that fantastical, arcing across like a rainbow across the ground. So anybody kind of should have immediately.
This one was something when I first saw it, I'm like, okay, it's obviously a stitched together image, and I'm like, that's not such a huge deal, maybe. And then I kind of saw the points where it was stitched together. I'm like, wait a minute. And then you start noticing, not only was it stitched together and like composited together, they cloned the Milky Way into it's the same constellation in 7 spots of the picture. So I mean, you're looking at it like that is just. I mean, that's way beyond what it should be.
It's basically just artwork at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not realistic at all.
It's photo stacking.
This is a nice image.
and that's something that's really, really not standard as in like it's a positive thing, but it's something that happens a lot in nature photography, especially like I see it a lot in aurora photography. If you see aurora photos that are just like where you have perfectly well exposed like houses and people and things in the foreground and then the aurora in focus in the background, 9 times out of 10, unless they're using some amazing tilt shift camera or they're just I know like 3 photographers on the planet that can do that type of work. Chances are they're doing photo stacking, which is basically they take one photo exposed for a certain thing and then have another photo exposed in particular for another one so that everything can be thing. It's not if you think about HDR photos, it's kind of like that, except it's not that horrible. It's not that much of a crime against humanity as HDR photography is. But that's just my personal opinion. But someone who never did it. But it is it's something that happens a lot in nature photography, and it's kind of looked around, but not when it's in National Geographic and not when it's in like publications that should be, at least if it's something like most of the times when you see photo stacking done well, it's how it looked to the naked eye or how it looked.
This wasn't even photo stacking. This was like taking parts of the constellation and just putting them across, like they're stamped in there. I mean, that's not photo stacking. That's enhancing the image with other parts of the image. I mean, that's a false image. I mean, it's one thing, making a beautiful image is fine. And if you want to present that work as like, this is a beautiful photograph I created, that's fine. But National Geographic, you have the expectation, like this is a real moment and it's real. It's supposed to be the real constellation, not a fake constellation. That is a fake constellation.
I mean, and like I said, like this is something that happens, this type of thing can happen a lot. But and I'm trying to dig up because there's a Twitter, a Twitter
responses.
Thread. Well, no, there's a Twitter thread. I think here it is, where a bunch of where a science consultant, PhD at Stanford, basically found a ton of them, a ton of from different photographers and things like that are doing this sort of thing, that whether they like duplicated trees, like took branches that looked better on this side and then put them on the other. And again, and things. So it's this interesting conversation that I think it's less so like whether or not National Geographic should be doing this. To me, it's a simple answer, no. Even with a caveat of this is a manipulated image, I don't think it's something that belongs in the world of National Geographic. But the question is this an ethical thing to do? Is this something that should be done kind of in general or tried to be passed off? I think it's interesting that there has been a conversation about it. I mean, even the poll at is worrisome to me at DIYphotography.net, where we're looking at this original article. Should National Geographic declare that it was manipulated? And thankfully, 90% roughly said it was unethical, but still 10% said, no, what does it matter? And that was a lot of the conversation that I was seeing online when we were talking about this. It's a pretty image. What does it matter? And it's also like, I don't know, even in nature photography, like, or almost especially in nature photography, I feel like it's important to at least be like, if you say, I photoshopped the hell out of this photo, isn't it gorgeous? You're a great photoshopper. It's not necessarily a great photograph though.
Right. Yeah. No, it's artwork. That's what it is.
And it's one thing to be in like, Digital Photographer magazine, and another to be in National Geographic.
Yeah.
The presumption of, it being a real moment and part of nature and is one that people have and expect, not a manipulated part of nature.
Yeah, but you think this is coming from the science desk of National Geographic, so these people should be more well in tuned with what is real, what isn't real. Have they said anything in response to this that you know of? Have they had
I have yet to see. I personally have yet to see a response. I haven't looked really hard, but all the articles that I've I've seen haven't done updates on it, and I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything from National Geographic's like social media side. So
I haven't seen anything either.
Be interesting. I mean, this would have been a while ago, so well, not a while necessarily that long, but like 20 days ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's just the biggest thing. I mean, is like, here's the thing. It's like, this is something that's been going on since the 50s, 40s, whatever, since basically you can do this sort of thing at all, even in a dark room. So it's not necessarily too surprising, I guess. It's sadly not surprising, but it's also kind of sad.
It's sort of like we have this thing where, you know, you have like court TV turned into True TV, which, you know, was then showing like, you know, documentaries and all that, and now only shows Impractical Jokers. You know, it's like
I'm sorry. I actually did just find a response. They actually removed the image from the Science and Innovation picture stories, to their credit. And editor's note says, on April 26th, National Geographic published photos by Beth Moon on nationalgeographic.com depicting the world's oldest trees against the night sky. Significant concerns about the veracity of the images have been raised on photo industry blogs and social media. National Geographic has a strict policy against photo manipulation, I guess, except for Steve McCurry.
They responded to Steve McCurry.
They did.
What's that?
They did respond about Steve McCurry.
Oh, they have a strict policy against photo manipulation, except, you know, unless it's in photo books that they make a ton of money off of. No offense. But, we have removed the images and related story pending the outcome of our investigation. Now this looks like it was it says April 26th is the only date that I see it as any date. This step does not mean we have determined that the images do not meet our standards, as we are unable to make a determination at this time. The images will not be reposted until they meet National Geographic standards, and it's been a month. I don't know why it takes a month to figure that out.
I want to see if the dust settles.
I mean, it's just. It's always disappointing because I get, you know, a lot of times you have, especially the content, you have a lot of these sites that have a very reputable part of them. Like, I know a ton of the most, like, people who I would trust almost without question that work at National Geographic or work as photographers for them. If they showed an image, I wouldn't doubt it for a second that it was 100% pure and true and everything. But then you have the blogger side, the kind of the content creation side of things when it comes to a lot of these sites. And it's not an excuse. I'm just saying it's like, what's disappointing is that they don't end up putting like the same kind of level of fact checking and the same kind of level of care a lot of times into these other, like, the side blogs that National Geographic has. Or any of these sites, whether it be Newsweek or whatever, they always have like kind of these side little things that that are blog, you know, kind of bloggy content creation sort of things, and they just don't have, those people usually aren't, you know, fact checkers and photo editors and to that level. And I could be completely wrong. Well, and maybe they did do all of this and that still somehow got past it, or they didn't care. I'm just literally trying to figure out how to give them the benefit of the doubt here.
No, and it's a very different thing. It's like when you're talking about, you know, the online and all this stuff, they're trying to put content up every single day, and not like, you know, a magazine where they have time to vet and stuff like that. Yeah. You know, there's just too much they're trying to pump out. And
the biggest thing is that this likely wasn't an image that, my guess is, based on knowing about their other issues with rights grabs and things like that they do with contests, that this isn't one of those things that they probably paid a ton of money for or paid at all for.
Yeah.
And so it ends up being, these sites have to create content with probably no money and no budget. Again, not excusing, just explaining how these things, how kind of behind the scenes things usually work with a lot of the sites, and why we see a lot of this happening often at sites and companies that we would consider very reputable. And so, yeah, it's just sad. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's another thing too, is like when, you know, people submitting content are claiming it's, you know, real, and it's not, it's false. I mean, if somebody submitted some stuff to me and said, hey, I'd love to post it on Around the Lens, I mean, I don't know. I would probably have a hard time discerning this photograph, you know, veracity. I mean, obviously, the person who looked at this and, the social media thankfully picked this out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But again, I think National Geographic should probably have hopefully the folks on staff who can better discern when a photo is manipulated. But
and it looks like they did by pulling it and doing making a statement. At least they did the right thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, they reacted the right way. But it'd be nice if they didn't publish the photo in the first place. But they're only human.
The big thing about these things is that we're all relatively easily tricked by these things. Mm-hmm. I've been tricked by some really good photo stacking ones when it comes to and obviously again, this is not just photo stacking. This is something 20 steps beyond. But for specifically about Aurora photos, where I'm like, oh my god, this is incredible. And then our former panelist a couple times, Carl Johnson's like, that's photo stacking. And then he pointed out specifically, he's like, look at specifically along the tree line, and it just things, and I'm like, oh wow, you're right. That is photo stacking. It's still an incredible image, but it is not how they presented it. Right. And I feel like National Geographic, with the weight that the magazine has, the weight that, especially considering it's literally one of the last places that exists that is primarily pictures. And this is a conversation, I'm going to do a segue here. Not a segue, but a tie-in. Conversation I had with Sue Morrow over at, who's the NPPA's editor at News Magazine, the magazine that NPPA puts out every 2 months, I think it is, 6 times out a year. But about how there's really no places anymore devoted to photojournalism, or at least factual pictures, pictures that have news stories or news value behind them. There's a lot of glossy magazines that have nice photos and art stuff, but nothing that's just news or just information, and that have to be not manipulated. You can have, there's like I said, there's a million different art magazines that have great photos in them, but they have no ethical lines of what is to be what can or can't be manipulated about those photos, about those images, and what they look like and who the people are in them. National Geographic is the one. Life is gone, Look magazine is gone, all these places are gone. National Geographic is one of them. They should be leading the fight about this conversation, and not just taking a step up about doing it in their own magazine, but opening when they screw up, having a video, having a big thing up in the place of that article, and I mean, this is the sort of thing that I feel is would be important enough to do at least an article in one of the magazines about how we're being tricked about certain things, about how on both sides, environmentalism, they'll use photos that aren't from there's a picture of a drought, and they'll use a photo that's from 5 years ago and not from the current situation, and not show factual basis for things. And that always ends up leading to doubt on people's, when they look at news about climate change, because they're faking images about dead seals being, showing up in New Orleans or something like that. And they should be leading this fight. But sadly, what they're doing really is for the most part cashing in on the free images that they can grab from people at this point for content and for tote bags and whatever else. I don't know if they do tote bags, but but I do actually.
They're not
have
NPR.
A National Geographic tote bag, but that's from their TV department. But it is just sad because it is one of the few places, and they have the. I would say that most people, I think, on both sides of the aisle probably still respect National Geographic more than most news organizations. I mean, certainly more than the Times and, whatever. So yeah, it just feels like this is one place that they could actually step up on to fight fake news or fake whatever the hell you want to call it. Yeah. And sadly, what they're doing is just, we'll look into it, guys. Sorry, there's a pending investigation.
It's been about a month since they started that investigation.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking them so long.
And then this article was published. 20 days ago, and pretty much lays out, without a doubt, that it was manipulated. So.
We'll wait for the full investigation to drop.
Yes,
I'm sure that'll come out in
no time. We're going to wait for the Mueller report.
Investigation.
That's right. It'll take 2 years, and it will be inconclusive.
And don't worry, we'll drop it on a Friday night.
There you go.
But there was no collusion. I'm going to tell you right now, no collusion.
Between National Geographic and the person
I
submitting
think we
the
need
photograph?
Bob Mueller to investigate that. Well, Bob's not doing anything now, right? I mean, he's got his time off, and
He's
he's
a
hanging out.
He's a freelancer.
No, he's still employed. He's still employed there. They haven't let him go yet.
Really? Wow.
Yep. It's part of the reason you can't just walk up to and testify. He has to go through. He's still employed by the.
Oh, well, he might be employed for another couple more years.
Yeah.
Keep cashing those paychecks.
Hey. Anyways, well, I can tell you one aspect of photography one magazine that's not manipulating their photographs is the New York Times Style magazine print edition. They are publishing true-to-life, real photographs of real places and real people and real things. No Photoshop here, folks. Of course, what they're photographing, they're getting slammed for, and this is basically using Myanmar as a runway to show off fashion. And this was another one that you brought up to us, Zach. So why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about this article here, and what should we think about this?
Now this is this is one that I saw on Twitter, and then thankfully I had the Sunday Times, and it was one of those like, I really have to look at this. Myanmar has had a basic genocide been happening, depending on war crimes have been happening throughout the country, and it's kind of been not covered enough as well. I mean, the Times has done good coverage on it, but the New York Times fashion magazine, or I think, is it still the fashion magazine, or is it Trend magazine or something? But they had a full spread titled "What Happened Here," which also is its own weird titling, which took a I believe African model, female model. She flew in and took these fashion photos in, of course, tens of thousands of dollars of clothing throughout the country. It could literally be basically anywhere in Southeast Asia, at least as far as I know, from not a person who's not been in Southeast Asia. And then printed around it is a story, "The Quandary of Myanmar: Will starving the country of visitors make things better?" So basically, it's a one of those discussions. Well, if we boycott or if we don't go to this country, will it make it better for the people that are there? And never mind, it's I don't know. You have to look at the photos and decide for yourself the idea. I mean, this is not the first time that fashion houses and kind of fashion spreads have been done in areas that really shouldn't have fashion spreads done in them, because they're like, literally the blood is barely dried on the machetes on the ground in some of these places, and they're running out there to use the mystique of it. It would be classless if it was just the photos, but I think that the fact that it's basically a tourism article attached to this fashion spread and doesn't really use the, like, talk about it in a serious way, doesn't use a local model. I mean, like, talking about so many things about, like, oh, well, starving this country, which is some people are starving there, from tourist dollars, help them, when you could have probably hired a model or just picked up somebody who's can fit these clothes and use her. But you're going to use this probably very expensive model, fly her internationally into the country. Yeah, it's just one of these tiring things where it's the fashion world, again, not having any ability to understand.
So I'm a little unclear here. You're for or against this?
Screw it. I'm for it because I think that's the way we need to solve world hunger. Is they're skinny and they'll fit into the clothes. And anyway, I can't even finish that joke.
Insert Zoolander jokes here.
Yeah.
So I'm of two minds of this. And I read this story, I was like, this is kind of, I don't know what they were thinking in terms of, like, how sort of how not listening to paying attention to kind of what they're doing is. But on the other hand, trying to play devil's advocate, this is bringing people's attention to something that they probably weren't thinking about or weren't paying attention to, and it uses something people care about, maybe like fashion or clothing, and it's using that as a vehicle by which to bring to light, obviously, someplace that have this devastating issue, which is Myanmar. So, I'm not saying it was the right idea.
That was sort of my first hope, but looking at the spread and what was written, it doesn't seem like that was the intent. It just doesn't seem like they were really kind of drawing the attention where it needed to be, and it was more about, I don't know, maybe I just didn't see it, but it just seemed like maybe we'll get some people talking about this, and maybe it was more like the shock value of it, and kind of like, people will talk about this because of what we did, not because of why we did it or anything like that.
Well, even in the front here it says, for the past 2 centuries, beautiful Myanmar has dealt with citizens' atrocity and whatnot after atrocity. So it's the first thing they say in the subtitle of the headline of the article is, this is a place that's been afflicted by atrocity. So at a minimum, for the person who's not at all initiated with what Myanmar is, they now know it's a place that has been affected by atrocity. What's the alternative? You have a fashion model, wear these clothes in a studio, and you just do a story about these clothes, right, or whatever. I don't know how they present fashion. I don't read fashion magazines myself, but if you can, even as shallow as it is, if you can somehow bring light to a real world critical issue using something that other people are interested in. It's kind of like, for instance, you see sometimes where they have, they've made video games about areas of the world that have been afflicted by, various wars or famines or whatnot, as a way to raise that awareness about it. And it's using one medium to let you know about something else that's happening someplace else. So I haven't read the full article here, so I don't know how well it does or does not go into detail about the issues affecting Myanmar, but at the very minimum, you're informing an audience that may not have any sort of knowledge or care about what's going on the whole world, and letting them know. No,
but I agree with what Zach was saying. What you were saying, you're not, if you really want to do that, you would bring the locals. You would bring in, you wouldn't. There are so many ways you could have done this tastefully and could have done it without, and they didn't.
I think that Greg Constantine, in the coconuts.co article that we posted in the show notes, there's an embedded Facebook post, and I'm just going to read some of it because honestly it summarizes it better. Because the web version of this, first, what the hell was New York Times thinking? The web version of the story presents this as a story about a country gone dreadfully wrong, but in print, this story is told in a much different way. It appears in the New York Times Style magazine and is paired with high fashion photographs, fashion prices, etc. Quote, what happened here for the last 2 centuries, beautiful Myanmar has been dealt and has dealt with its citizens atrocity after atrocity. Text in the story, written by Rafia Zaharia, include, quote, in August 2017, Myanmar initiated a round of ethnic slaughter, mass gang rape, and the burning and razing of hundreds of villages. Inserted in this text about atrocity and genocide, you'll find a stylized shopper's guide. Burberry scarf, $690, and dress, $18.90. Jill Sander dress, warm underneath, $15.90. Pac Rabin pants, $7.50. It's the biggest thing is if you look at it, because I actually didn't look at it online until kind of right now, and so I can kind of see how you wouldn't see that. But look at the photos that are embedded in that thing, and look at how the layout is. Full, like basically 75% of the page photos, and then this story run over all of those. There's not a single page in this story that just has text. So when they're talking about genocide and rape and slaughter, there's a photo of a fashion model posing in at minimum $4,000 worth of clothing, which never mind is I don't even dare to gander on how many years that that outfit could would have that have a random person in my
village would feed, or how many
and so it's just this is nowhere near in the first time. I mean, hell, one of my favorite places to shop when I can afford it is Banana Republic, and they've done spreads in colonial-esque areas and things like that for decades. It's nothing necessarily surprising that the fashion world has done this. What surprises me is that the New York Times would think that this is possibly in any way, shape, and form a good idea, especially with that layout. I think that you could have a less tasteful, or less tasteful. I think you have a more tasteful, or less tasteless, I'll say, layout where you have the images and then the story, or the story, then the images, and keep them separate. And I think that you could do something like that. I wouldn't advise it, and I wouldn't think it's a good idea, because the idea of matching genocide and fashion...
It's just, at the end of the day, it's just tasteless.
Yeah. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I understand. I always have this joke whenever I meet one of the Nikon guys about that they should sponsor me, and then they're friends of mine.
I don't think that's a joke.
No, well, it's not really a joke. At this point, it bothered them, and I'm not, like, a buddy of JC Carey, great guy, works at Nikon, and I just go, hey, have you guys started thinking about sponsoring me yet? Because as anyone knows who follows me, I'm a complete whore for Nikon, unpaid whore too. So it's just one of those. But it goes, he's just like, I would love to, but your work, man. And I go, I know, I'm joking. Obviously I'm joking. I can't imagine that Nikon's like, yeah, that guy who takes all the photos of the Nazis. Yeah, you should. I mean, obviously, 100 years from now, they'll care about it, or 50 years, it'll be that thing, I mean, but, when we talked about last time about like Leica and the Tank Man, that bad commercial. I forget, it was last week or the week before.
It wasn't a bad commercial. It was
no, but the stupid. I mean, personally, I think it was a good commercial. Never mind the fact that the photo wasn't taken with a Leica. That's why I was going to say it's a bad commercial. Yeah. It's not true. But it is one of those things where it's just like they kind of did an okay job because they focused so much on the work and the photojournalism side of it. But like, I don't know if I would ever, if I was a company, I'd ever go down that route of advertising a product along with, a mass slaughter, like even in Tiananmen Square. The idea that you would attach it to a genocide. I mean, this is like Hugo Boss being like, well, we made the Nazis look really good. Yeah. Not a thing. They want to
disassociate. Remember, at the next Klan rally, don't wear white after Labor Day.
Yeah. I mean,
fashion tip.
I don't know. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I see you on the street corner, Zach, going up to cars, be like, hey, big boy, you want to see this Nikon camera? Huh? You want to pay me some money? I can show you this Nikon camera.
You've not seen me with the Nikon Z6. I just walk up to people and go that also shoot Nikon and go, have you seen this yet?
Yeah. Hey, big boy, you want to see this camera? Want to see this lens? It comes up every few months, it feels like, and we've talked about the subject before, where again, tone deaf, usually white, well off. Probably not just Americans, but people in the first world are coming to these third world nations and doing their photo shoots. They're in the wedding shoots and everything like that, and it just is like it's really like almost poverty porn at this point, or like not poverty so much as just like not massacre, but just despair porn.
It's the shock value, and they're just not
right.
It just doesn't make sense.
But you mentioned, Zach, how long it would take for some of these people to afford, the clothing. It would take their entire lives. I wonder how much it would cost for them to buy a $10,000 camera, which is what Fujifilm is coming out with.
Wow,
that might have been one of the best segues I've ever seen.
That hit the wind out of it.
How long would it take them to buy the Fujifilm GFX 100, which was recently unveiled, the game-changing 102 megapixel mirrorless camera? This is a pretty neat camera. Honestly, it's the size of like your D5, your other sort of big size DSLR, professional DSLR camera, but it can shoot 102 megapixels. It's mirrorless. It's got a giant sensor. It's really an impressive looking camera. And it sells for $10,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but honestly, I remember back in the day when I was looking at the first, generations of like digital medium format cameras, and those things were extremely expensive, like $40,000 to $60,000. The ones that had like the digital backs and stuff like that were using the medium format bodies. But this is using a modern body. It's got in excess of 100 megapixels. It's only $10,000. It's got two card slots. Ooh, that seems to be a rarity in the industry nowadays. But no, I mean, it looks like a very impressive piece of kit. And I'll throw it over to our resident medium format camera owner who can tell us what he thinks of it. So, Travis?
I have now what is the little brother to that, the 50. The 50R GFX. I think it's pretty damn impressive that what they've done with that camera. And you say $10,000. Oh my God, that's so much. But actually, for medium format, it's the first time you're going, wow, that's not $10,000 is an amazing deal.
Yeah.
It is only $834 a month for 12 months, right? Guys.
That's not seriously. So bad. That's not when you put it like that. I'm going to get two.
I financed this thing over 5 years like a car.
The sensor is a little larger than a large format, and it's actually image stabilized. So you're getting a medium format image stabilized camera, which is a medium format. That's insane.
Amazing.
I mean, I think this is sort of groundbreaking. And what's nice is the reason I got the medium format is because I have plenty of full sensor, Sony's and the look of a medium format. It's really just a different look. The way it renders the focus and the bokeh and the details and Fuji has really their sensors on the money in terms of rendering color and stuff like that. It's really a beautiful image.
Yeah.
So I've seen what the 50 does. I sort of is it buyer's remorse that I'm not really, because that's another $6,000 so I'm like, I can wait on this one. I'll sell this one and I'll wait till it comes down a couple grand.
Yeah, but I mean your lenses would be compatible with this new camera, right?
Absolutely. So, that's the one thing. This line does not have a lot of lenses yet. So right. I would save up a little. It's got a couple good lenses, but there's not a lot of availability and not a lot of fast glass. They have some 4.0s and some 5.6s. There's not a lot of 2.8 or 2.
Really?
Any 2.
Wow.
Really, no.
That kind of sounds like the latest lens lineup of most of these new mirrorless cameras from the main manufacturers.
Yeah,
they don't have the lenses.
Sony. Yeah, Sony's got a lot of killing. They're in their second and third generations of their glass, which is just amazing. They're making some 135 millimeter and some SRT or 100.
This is a weird question. Does this not shoot video?
It does shoot video.
It does shoot video.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, I was just looking at
and
the specs
on this sensor.
It's
going to be pretty wild to see what it's shooting on a full frame, sensor like that. It's going to be pretty beautiful.
It does do 4K 30p, so that's nice to have there. Kind of in line with most of the new medium or new mirrorless cameras that are out. And honestly, if I could justify the purchase of this, I would skip the full frame sensor race and just go straight to the large format or the medium format.
I mean, if you really want to get the best out of product photography or portraits or landscape, this thing is just on another level. And especially you couldn't get into that game really. You're looking at phase ones and Hasselblads and stuff like that are $35, $40, $50, $60,000. To have something that is this high caliber. And image stabilized, which is incredible. Those other cameras don't have. At 10 grand it sounds like a steal. You're saying, 10 grand's a steal, but it really is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I love this rotating EVF that they have on here. That's wild.
It's changeable. Yeah, you can change the top part for different types of modules.
Yeah. And I wish, of course, like all these cameras, I wish the screen flipped outward. But I guess
it flips. It just doesn't turn around. I mean, it does flip out, which is nice.
You're not going to be doing any vlogging.
There's no selfies.
I would if I could.
Flip up selfies. Medium format selfies is
what
not.
If I could, but I can't.
I don't know. I want to shoot my YouTube vlog with the.
People use. I mean, like for instance, Peter McKinnon. God, he uses a 1DX Mark II or something like that. He's using a big old camera for his vlog.
That's one of them. Yeah. That's one of the things.
Why not? Why not have the best possible quality you can get? You know, I mean,
and actually,
it's an arms race.
Their phone adapter works pretty good. So you can actually, you can sit there and actually film stuff if it's on a tripod, and you sit there and shoot. So it works pretty well, and it transfers the phone really nicely as well.
But I mean, do you see yourself upgrading to something like this in the future?
Possibly, yeah. I'm gonna let it go through, some months here. It's not something that I'm an early adopter on,
right.
But it's something that I could see myself down the line. It's like sell the 50 and sell some other gear and work into that, especially for some higher end shooting and studio shooting and portrait work.
The big thing I see with this camera, which is, I mean, if I'm a rental house, I'd be buying just a stack of these because this is the sort of thing I've always wanted to shoot. Especially some of the larger protests and rallies and that sort of thing. I've always wanted to shoot it with digital, a digital medium format, just because, you get a crowd and being able to zoom in, cut in, and just being able to have that file size of being able to print like crazy. I mean, DSLR,
it also just renders differently. The picture has a different life than the full frame.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible. Even you see some of these great photographers that took what look like family snapshots on a large format or a medium format, and they have a different life to them. They have a different. You look at it differently, and you can't really place why it looks so different. But when you really kind of analyze the detail of the people and the way it renders the focus in the background, it's incredible. It really is beautiful.
No, it would be seriously fantastic to shoot like a protest or a rally with this.
And this one's with mine, I wouldn't. Yeah, I could almost suggest doing it with the 50R, but it seems like they've upped the image stabilization and upped the focus on the 100. So it's.
Well, I mean, the crazy thing too. I mean, it's saying 5 frames per second.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on a medium format.
On a 100 megapixel, 102 megapixel camera. That seems.
I wonder how many frames you get before it caches all that.
Yeah.
You get your 5 frames, then you gotta wait a minute for it to. I've had issues with my. I've been studying to shoot a lot more raw on my GH5, and that I start to shoot a little bit, and this is why I wouldn't use this camera for necessarily real world paying sort of gigs, is because. I fill up that cache, I can't do anything. I can't shoot video. I can't take photos. It just says, it's reading.
And I have to say that the one great thing about the Sony, especially the A9 and the A7R3, is the buffer on it is you can take the A9, which shoots almost 24 frames a second, and you can shoot that thing for almost 3 minutes. It just keeps going, and to the point where I'm bored. I'm going to stop. This is not fun anymore.
Well, you want to make the longest animated GIF ever.
You could, you definitely could.
We're wait, I'm just going to shoot a film, 24 frames per second.
Yeah,
but I don't shoot like that, and a lot of people I don't know. I mean, I'm not a sports shooter. I'm not, it's not. So my world isn't. I don't need it.
Yeah. Well, to Zach's point, who was holding up a memory card a minute ago, I do have the fastest UHS-2, 1000 whatever X 150. Again, these are top of the line memory cards designed for this camera, and they're still stuttering. When I'm shooting a bunch of RAWs or if I'm shooting a lot of video. And so again, I mean, maybe I got to figure out the best. I think it was the fact that I was going back and forth from shooting a string of RAWs and then trying to shoot some 4K video, because that's what I was doing for this.
If you're shooting to that Sony card and you're still having the problem, then it's the camera.
Right. Yeah. But I was looking at some of these sample images that they offer here on the website, and it's just amazing, because it's I'm looking at this one photograph. It's the portrait of the lady with the glitter on her face and stuff like that, and it's just I zoom in on her eyeball, and I can see the details of the flash.
It's another world. The eyeball itself, the detail is another world. And that was the first thing I noticed when I got my Fuji, the 50R. It is that just being able to zoom in and seeing, and the crop factor and all that, that you could do the details. It was it's oh my God.
I will say though, if you're shooting portraits, you gotta be extremely cognizant of every little bit and bob and hair and everything on your subject, because I was zooming in on this lady's face, and She needs to kind of do a little work in the nose area. She's got a little nostril hair.
Well, that's you're going to get that off any of these cameras nowadays. These high resolution cameras, your Nikons, your Sonys, they render this 42 megapixel camera on a Sony or a Nikon. You're looking at you get good at retouching.
Yeah. Right.
Actually, I had to warn the journalist I work with when we finally switched to not just 4K, high end 1080p. Kind of had 1080p for a while, but like the DSLR quality level, kind of like my videographer's upgraded. I'm like, you need to. And I was editing some footage, and he had nose hairs out. And you could see them silhouetted because it was so good in a cab we're driving. I still remember this because every time I'm shooting with him, I'm like, I have to bring nose hair clippers now because, now if I shoot with a photograph with him, I'm shooting 4K video on this. And so I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not going to go through and,
I don't know if
blur that out.
I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse that you guys don't have to retouch or can't retouch. My world is, you have to retouch.
So no.
So you get to bypass that, the hours of retouching. You don't have to do it. Like, sorry, it's against, ethics. I can't, your zit's there forever.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah. So, definitely wouldn't, I won't be able to afford or buy this camera, but it's
I'll definitely be able to get one to play with. So
okay, yeah, I'd love to pick one up and give it a try, but and get some frames from it. Maybe I'll rent one, someday in the future if I could get somebody to pay me to rent it. But it's definitely neat. It's indicative of the future because now we're seeing even in the full frame market, we're seeing 45, 46, 48 megapixel cameras. So
yeah, it's exciting. You're going to see a lot more.
I mean, that was the domain of medium formats, not too long ago. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing next generation of full frames even that start to approach that domain. So
again, the biggest, to me, not beyond the price, which is obviously great for this, but is the fact that it is it's not in this article. I must have seen it somewhere else, but they lined it up with the other full body Nikon and Canon, and it's the same size.
Right, that's amazing.
Yeah,
and it's just
as the 1DXs.
Yeah. The full, with the grip and everything. And it's just, and to me that's the biggest thing because I always dreamed of using a medium format at most of the work I do, and it's just like I can't carry this thing around. But I can carry this and another camera. Assuming I hit the lotto at some point. But
there you go. 2 medium formats.
I have a very low bar for what the lotto is for me.
The 50 R is about the size of my Canon, of the 5D Mark IV.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and close up this week's show. Zach, tell the audience about what you have put on our Patreon that they can listen to if they're a supporter.
Here it is. I interviewed, did a really great interview with Sue Morrow, the editor of News Photographer. The NPPA's, this is the Best of Photojournalism 2019. We talked a little bit about this magazine specifically, but we talked mostly about just kind of the importance of a magazine like News Photographer and in a world where Life magazine, Look magazine, even, and then you start going to Time and Newsweek and all the other places barely have any photos or any, they don't do like the big photo spreads like they used to. Even New York Times magazine, not travel magazine, but magazine doesn't really do them as often as I feel as they used to. So
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. You should talk to her about supporting the show and becoming a sponsor. We'd love NPPA to be our sponsor. Any day now, guys. Come on over.
Well, what we talked a lot about, though, was the fact that NPPA doesn't have like a large budget, because I joked about, I would love to talk to you or or somebody from your team originally when I asked her, and she just responded to me on Twitter.
Yeah, my team.
And so, yeah, no, it's no. We're gonna, I think, hopefully, we're gonna have return conversations about different things, and maybe not make it a regular thing, but obviously that's up to her and how much time she has to spend. Because, dear God, she also runs a lot of the website and things like that. But I did find out, if you're not a member of the NPPA, or if you're not in that world, you can actually email her directly and subscribe to the magazine, which is cool, because I think it's worthwhile to do.
Yeah.
And also, there's a lot of changes coming to not just the magazine, but also the website and how you get the info that's in the magazine. So she talks a little bit about that. I don't know how much
it
when we recorded or when we were off recording, but there's a lot of changes. That much I can say. So yeah.
Well, we'll be putting up that interview after it appears on Patreon. We'll put that interview into the regular stream of podcasts. So if you're subscribed to this podcast already, you'll see that pop up on your stream as a special, just like we did with your interview with Benjamin Chesterton, which is now available on the regular stream. A great interview, by the way, Zach. So thank you for providing that. And we'll be doing those interviews every so often. Like, for instance, when I go down to focus on the story this coming weekend, which, by the way, if you're in the DC area, I highly recommend checking out Focus on the Story. It's a neat little photo workshop, and got a lot of great people. A lot of people who have appeared on this show. Jamie Rose, Ruddy Rowe, and he wasn't on the show, but Iberio Nex of his podcast, which is much bigger, more popular than ours, The Candid Frame. He'll be there. So a lot of great people will be there, and I'll be trying to get as many interviews as I can, and I'll throw those interviews and probably do a little package for our Patreon page first, and then you'll see it eventually on our website. But if you're in that area, if you're in the DC area, please don't hesitate to reach out and say hello, and maybe we'll get together and we'll talk about visual journalism. Wouldn't that be fun? Nice. Wouldn't that be exciting? We'll get together over some drinks and visual journalism.
Road trip.
Yeah. But anyways, Travis, do you have anything you want to throw at us before we sign off tonight?
No, I mean, thanks, as always, thanks for watching us. And if you have any follow-ups or want to know any more about the gear or what we talked about tonight or any of the subjects, or if you have subjects you'd like to talk about, let us know. Contact us at aroundthelens.com.
That's right. If you're interested in coming on the show, if you have a background in visual journalism or know somebody who does, please let us know. We'll be happy to program you in for our broadcast. And just to remind everybody, starting July, we'll be moving to the 3 p.m. hour. So if you do watch the show live and want to catch us, we'll be live streaming at 3 p.m. If you don't, then you'll still see our show whenever it comes on, and whenever I get a chance to publish it.
Watch at your leisure.
That's right, which will probably be about Monday night or Tuesday morning. So, but anyways, this has been Around the Lens, episode 176. I want to
Happy Memorial Day episode.
Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Go thank a veteran and go
I know.
Recognize.
We wish you a very blessed Memorial Day.
That's right. Go recognize the sacrifices of our service members.
Exactly.
But anyways, for Zach Roberts and Travis Keys, I am David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 176, and we're out.
You're doing great.
Oh, we'll get it right one of these nights, one of these days. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.